Hi there, my name is Ulf Johansson. Welcome to this lecture on retail internationalization and branding. These subjects are, in my mind at least, very closely related. And what I will give you here is only a very broad overview of the subject. And this overview, of course, does not substitute for reading and reflecting over the course literature. And connected to this digital lecture, there is also some different assignments that are to be solved in different groups. So the lecture on the 11th of November will be you telling me what you found in your different assignments. Now, it's always interesting to look at the largest retailers in the world, but it's also interesting to look at the second largest and the third largest. Of course, at the top of the pile we find Walmart. Walmart is the size of a smaller country, 2.5 million people employed. But we also find big retailers like French Carrefour and British Tesco close to the top of the pile. They are more or less grocery retailers, and of course grocery retailers have a larger turnover than specialty retailers, as we buy food more often than we do buy specialty products. The subject of internationalization in retailing has been high on the agenda for 20-25 years, both in practice but also in theory. But when you talk about internationalization and globalization, it's important to look a little bit more closely on what we mean by internationalization. Do we mean customer spending? Do we mean management functions being more international? Do we mean that retail concepts are becoming more international? Or do we mean that operations are becoming more and more international? I think often, without saying that that's our definition, we talk about operations of retail companies being more international. I'm going to come back to this because I think this is important. If we look at internationalization and we look at the 100 largest retailers, there's only 20 retailers that operate in more than 20 countries. Quite a lot of the 100 largest retailers operate in less than 10 countries. And if we looked at the 250 retailers around the world, we see that the North European ones have only 13.3. I say only because you might expect it to be more of the largest retailers. 13.3 of the North American retailers. It's a little bit larger in Europe, and then again lesser shares when you come to Asia Pacific. I mean, this also has to do with the size of the home market, of course. The home market of North American companies being so large, not forcing retailers to actually internationalize quite early. But what we can see is that to some extent, compared to different manufacturing sectors, the internationalization is a bit less than you would maybe expect. And why not more internationalization and globalization in retail? Well, in many sectors, grocery, for instance, which is one of the largest sectors in retailing, it's quite culturally bound what you buy for food, and I'm going to come back to that a little bit because there is a lot of difference walking into a Tesco store in China compared to walking into a Tesco store in London, for instance. And the difference has to do with the fact that, for instance, in China you need to have a wet market in a Tesco store, and a wet market in a London Tesco store would make customers feel very uncomfortable. And this is one I think it's important to understand also the difference between being international and being global. Being international really means that you are active in more than one country. Being global means that you are active on different continents around the world. I mean, Europe, being active in many countries in Europe would not qualify as being global, of course. You would need to add a few more continents like the US, North America, Australia, or Asia, etc. to become more global. And again, looking back at the world's global grocery retailers like Carrefour, Metro, Casino, Walmart, they aren't active in that many countries actually. Looking at the Swedish global retailers, you of course see that IKEA and H&M have more than 90% of the turnover in foreign sales, which of course has to do with Sweden being such a small country. And IKEA seems like a very global retailer. It is a global retailer. It's active in Europe, America, Asia, Australia, but still only in 39 countries. H&M, 38 countries. And H&M have added country after country for a long time, adding many countries. Zara is an even more global retailer than H&M. Now, is there really not more internationalization and globalization in retailing? Now again, coming back to the fact that we tend to look at internationalization from the perspective of different companies going to different countries. In Europe we also have the tendency to look at internationalization from our perspective and globalization from our perspective. But there is something going on in retailing that adds to internationalization and globalization, which adds another dimension to this. And that has to do with the shift towards e-commerce, e-tailing, so to speak. In the UK there's been talk of the death of the high street for a number of years. This is from Terry Leahy, who was the former CEO of Tesco. There's lots of articles in British newspapers about the death of the high street. In the US you find these type of articles, shopping malls closing down, and of course it has to do with the fact that customers lead a more multi-channel life. I often talk about there are three waves of e-commerce. The first wave was end of the 90s, beginning of the 20th century, with these type of for that period in time, very advanced apparel retailers like Bow.com. In the second wave we have these type of e-tailers. But now we're also seeing the third wave of e-tailers. I mean, Zappos isn't in Sweden yet, but they will come. Alibaba will also come to Sweden. This is an Indian big retailer, and that's more of them. And we see increasing number of e-tailers present in this example, the Swedish market. So can we talk about the fact that there is a stagnating internationalization and globalization to retailing? No, I don't think so. If we take the perspective of the customer, I don't think that is a proper picture, because there it's growing, and it's growing through the fact that retailing now also not have just a physical store, but also have the internet as a channel. Looking at the latest PayPal study, which follows 6 markets across the world, you can see increasing shopping over the internet from different parts in the world. They look at 130 million cross shoppers in 2018, spending over $300 billion e-shopping. Going back to the company perspective again, when it comes to retail internationalization, the normal process by which retailers become international is often termed in terms of reluctance, caution and ambition, which really means that you go to the closest markets first. And looking at Swedish retailers, you can see that both H&M and IKEA of course went to the Nordic countries first. You can always ask why H&M and IKEA didn't go to Finland, but that's another story in itself. But you go to the closer markets first, where you, in some aspects at least, share the language, and then you go from there. And this gets me to the first assignment I want to give you. I want you to find international and global retailers outside the usual suspects, outside the usual countries with And that gets me to the first assignment I want to give you. I want you to find international and global retailers outside the usual suspects. And by the usual suspects I mean these type of retailers that we all know about. Because I know as there is a growing part of international and global retailers on the internet side. Who are they, and in what sectors are they expanding? Can you see any patterns in this? One of the really big questions, and very difficult questions, connected to internationalization and globalization is whether you should use a standardized strategy or whether you should adapt your operations to different markets that you go into. If you ask students around this, most students will say, of course you should adapt. You need to respect the fact that there are different marketing environments and different markets. Of course you should adapt. And if you ask managers, they are often very, very reluctant to adapt. They would rather like to work the same way in different markets. And I think that's one of the reasons for the difference between students and managers in this respect, is that managers usually understand and respect the fact that companies work along a certain business model. And if you adapt too much, you need to change that business model. And if you change your business model, you can never be sure that you're going to make money. Let me take an example. One of the useful models I think you find when you talk about business model is the Osterwalder business model generation. It has 9 parts. It is a very useful analytical tool for understanding how a company operates its business. Now if we look at IKEA in China and Japan, and we look at the usual way of how IKEA works, it works in a sort of way that I've tried to describe here with the yellow post-it notes. It's value for money furniture for the masses. It's self-service in store and online. Your segment really is women. You also work towards business customers. Some of the key resources you have is the supply chain, the skills for product development, the stores, Key activities: production, product development, running and designing stores. And IKEA also has some key partners. I mean, the supply chain and all the suppliers is of course key partners. But they also need to partner up in different countries with national and local authorities when they want to establish stores. Now, if we look at IKEA moving into China and Japan, there are some changes to the way IKEA operate that are important. And the largest changes that were made is around self-service in the store. When IKEA opened in China, customers had never seen a store like that, and self-service was an unknown concept. DIY, do it yourself, is something that is very well established in Europe, well established in the States, but in China it was totally new. Now, it's easy to say, moving into China, 1.3 billion people, why don't you adapt to the setup that suits China? Get away from the do-it-yourself, build different stores in China than you do in the rest of the world. One argument for not doing that is that you become a retailer like any other retailer. But more importantly, if you do that way in China, you will destroy your supply chain. You will need to set up in a different way in that market, and in the end, that would destroy the business model, and not what has really made IKEA successful in other markets. In IKEA's case in China and Japan, they choose to do small adjustments to their business model, keep on for the large part to what's been successful for them, and it seems to be working for them. One of the articles you have is an article that I've co-authored with some other colleagues that looks at standardization of IKEA when it comes to different parts of the world where IKEA has gone in. So please read that, and you will find some more details around standardization and adaptation. Now I would like to move over more towards retail branding. And the question you really need to ask coming into this is, how can you earn money as a retail company? How can you create high return on investment? And then we have to go to the DuPont model and look at, there are two ways really, and those are relevant both for retailers. There is being very good at working with capital employed. That has to do with costs, how we do things, routines, procedure, processes. And if we are very good at turning our capital around quickly, and most retailers need to be, because otherwise they tie up capital too much in different parts of their operation. But the other part of how to become successful, how to increase return on investment, is of course to work with the margin, the price, and that is market efficiency. What do we do? How do we make sure that these things are attractive to customers? And if you have a very well-known brand, and that's the link to retail branding, you are able to get a higher margin. At least that's in theory. If your brand is valued more, people will accept a higher price, and you will get a higher margin if you are good at working with the cost as well. And retail branding really has to do with a couple of things. Looking at the IKEA brand, there are at least three perspectives on the IKEA brand. One is how we see ourselves, and the other one has to do with companies are always in a state of change. So there is always something relating to how do we want others to see us? What change are we trying to initiate so that the way people view us becomes different? But also, more importantly maybe, you have the image which relates to how others see us. So retail branding is really about making sure that these three concepts are in sync. That's the ideal situation. So to make sure that there is so little difference between how others see us than how we see ourselves. And in the IKEA case, you'll find this in the article that is on the course as well. IKEA works in a very standardized way. At least that's how they want to look on their operations. If you dig a little bit deeper, you see there are things that are adjusted within the business model. And one of the things you can see quite clearly is that basically the range of 10,000 products is the same around the world. The store basically looks the same around the world. There are some changes, the 5 first rooms you enter into, etc., etc. The catalog basically looks the same around the world. An IKEA family as a customer relationship building tool is also, again, basically the same around the world. The only part really where you have some localization in the marketing in IKEA is the advertising part. And that leads me into the second assignment. As IKEA mostly adopts on the top of the pyramid of marketing tools. I want you to have a look at the commercials you find on YouTube from different countries of IKEA, and see if you can find a pattern between the different countries, or if every IKEA country is different in the image they want to create. Now, continuing on retail internationalization and moving over to retail branding, as we are at the moment moving towards that, I just want to emphasize that there, in the course literature, there are two very interesting articles on the intersection between internationalization of retailing and retail branding. Both these articles is by my colleague in the University of Stirling, Steve Burt. And the first article follows Marks and Spencer, a legendary classic, an institution in the British society. For many years could do nothing wrong, except that they've had real troubles internationalizing. And the article that Steve Burt has co-authored tells some of these problems, trying to transfer an iconic brand position in one market to another one. And in Marks and Spencer's case, it really hasn't worked very well outside the UK. For instance, trying to argue with the French that they should buy British food and British clothes, my God, that really doesn't translate. The other article by Burt and Mavromatis follows the discount retailer Dia and what happens to the Dia position in different markets. Even though they do the same thing in different markets, the brand position becomes a different one. Moving on from these retailers to the legendary retailer we mentioned in the start, Walmart. Still only around 15% of Walmart's turnover is from international operation. The bulk is still the United States, and Walmart has a fantastic business model. I mean, it's such a classic school example of how you build a dominating business model. The cost and the price control of the system, the supply system. Walmart is the world leader in relationships between suppliers and Walmart, and also in using ICT for these relations in order to make sure that they always have the things that the customer wants in store. And of course there is also a very, very special culture among the employees of Walmart. You may not like it, but there is a certain culture. Walmart have tried Europe twice. The first case, 1997, was when they bought Asda. It was already called the Walmart of the UK, but they bought Asda, and they've done reasonably well with that investment. They haven't grown as they expected in the UK, but they've done reasonably well. The other one is in Germany, and I think it's 2, maybe 3. Time moves faster than you think, so maybe it's 4 years ago that Walmart exited Germany. They sold all their investment and moved on. And that is quite hard to understand. How could one of the biggest retailers in the world, the biggest retailer in the world actually, with a fantastic business model, how could they mess up in Germany? And then we move on to the third assignment I want a couple of the groups to look at. What went wrong for Walmart in Germany? What did they do wrong, if anything? Or was it just pure luck that they didn't, or pure chance that they actually didn't succeed? If we look at standardization, adaptation, did they do too much standardization, too much adaptation, or was it anything else? Moving more closely now to retail branding. What is a brand really? It's more of a rhetorical question here. For me, it's a container in which you can fill with meanings. That's what you try to make with a brand. You try to move away from the product competition, the generics, towards the conceptualization of a brand. And we have the fairly simple connotations and conceptualizations of brands from the manufacturing side, but we really have to remember that when we move into retailing, branding is so much more complex. We both have to do with vertical integration and horizontal integration. If we look at a business like Walmart, 2.5 million employees, well, what is the Walmart brand? It's quite complicated to say, but there is also a need in Walmart to keep the brand as something fairly distinct. But again, it's very difficult in retailing to do that. And coming towards this conceptualization of a retail brand, I think this quotation from Archie Moore, the CEO of Asda, who used to be the CEO of Asda. The challenge in retailing is that customers experience your brand directly. What they experience in the store is the brand. So stores have to be both internally and externally coherent. That's what I meant by horizontal integration. The way the brand is projecting and advertised externally to reflect the way it lives and works internally. Together with some colleagues and based on a lot of the work we've done with IKEA, we've tried to conceptualize branding in retailing as having 3 different sides, or 3 different angles to it. One of these is the store, and that's, if you look in the literature, that's where most people have seen the retail brand. It's experienced in the store, and how the store is set up, etc. That's what the retail brand is. But then you have the other side, and that's products. During the last 20 years, we've seen a move towards retailers, for instance in the grocery industry, towards private label. But in some tech sectors you have very little private label. But still the products that the retailer sells is part of the brand and part of the retail experience, so to speak. The third part has to do with the fact that retailers in many countries are a very large part of society. They take space, they invade different spaces, so companies become very much a part of society, a part of popular culture. And I'll come a little bit more into that later on here. And branding is really about, I think, to some extent, three things. Be distinct and dare to stand out. Be consequent in what you do, and also be emotionally relevant. That the latter thing becomes more and more important as competition with functional properties and the red ocean that is resulting from that. It becomes much more difficult to stand out when it comes to functional parts. One of the main challenges for retailers in branding is the same as for many other type of companies, to get this image, identity, profile triangle to match. And if we also look at the retail offer being something that has to do with merchandise, service, the people who shop in the store, the physical facilities, convenience, promotion, store atmosphere, some institutional factors, what happens after you've been in the store, as a load of different variables that actually play a part in how you experience the brand as a customer. And if we look at different retail brands, there are a couple of different companies that do measurements of the different brands. And of course the Walmart brand is very highly ranked in the United States. But if we look at in Asia Pacific, we see a lot of other brands that are highly ranked. If we look at in another ranking, we still see Walmart fairly high up, but we also see some Swedes over there in the case of IKEA. When it comes to branding, and not least retailing, we also of course have seen movements that makes the traditional way of looking at your brand as something you control yourself, as something of the past. So brand conceptualizations, also when it comes to the retailing side, is more and more influenced by the consumer culture approach, where image doesn't only come from interaction with the product. It's nothing that is solely authored by the firm and the company, and that the image becomes something that is co-constructed by a range of stakeholders. And the one who puts this best, I think, is Douglas Holt in his conceptualization of brand as something that is authored by a lot of different authors, so to speak. One is the firm, but also popular culture, customers, influencers of other kinds. And that's the reason why we also, in our conceptualization of the retail brand, have the company as one part and how the company is perceived in society. Just looking at the example of IKEA, that is present in a lot of other ways in society than just through the stores and the products. In positive senses, there are a number of fan clubs for IKEA on the internet, but there are also a number of hate clubs. IKEA have featured in many not so nice connections, not so many nice circumstances. The founder Ingvar Kamprad has been found to actually have been part of the Nazi movement in Sweden in the 30s. IKEA have been in the press a lot when it comes to sourcing and sorting methods. 10-15 years ago there were a couple of cases around child labor when it came to some of IKEA's products. So I mean, how the brand is perceived doesn't really only have to do with what you experience as a customer in the store or how you feel about their product. It also has to do with the image that is created around a company in popular culture. In IKEA's case, there's been a lot of not so nice literature on how IKEA do business. And really the retail product is really what you as a company need to think about it in terms of what is viewed in the eyes of the consumer. There are some visible, tangible, intangible, experiential expressions there. And it needs to be some consistency and clarity. But on the other hand, all of these things are extremely hard to project in a unified way, as we saw when we saw that there are different authors. But if you look at the branding of the retail store, there are all these elements. One of these elements that companies try to differentiate their stores by is the formats they use, to try to distinguish between different formats and what is actually offered in these different formats. This is the UK retailer Tesco's formats. 6 different formats, so to speak. Extra, the really big ones. Express being the really small Tesco ones. To try to make sure that the different formats are indeed adapted to different settings and different customer groups. And looking at the store, you also see this model that builds around the fact that if employees are really satisfied with their work, that will translate into customers being positive towards being in the store. This leads to customers coming back, and that in turn leads to higher margins, higher profits, etc. And this really has to do with how you work in the store and how you set the store up and how you make sure that the customer feels welcome in the store. Moving on towards the products and product branding, the part of retail branding that has to do with the profits. Like I said before, there's been a move the last 20 years towards retailers putting their own brand names or brands they own, the brand names they own on the products in the stores. Tesco is one of those examples. depending on how you count, 40 to 60% of what you see in a Tesco store is under the Tesco name. When this started, it was really just copying manufacturer brand products, but it's moved on since then. There is a quite well-known conceptualization of different levels of private brands, where you have level 1 as the very much generic low price type of private label, to level 4, which really is products that are as advanced, if not more advanced, than leading manufacturer brands. If we look at Tesco, for instance, in the grocery section, they have 7 different types of private label. You have the level 3 and the level 4, which is the more advanced products, and you also have the level 1, level 2 Tesco everyday value. But looking back, there's been a move towards more and more advanced products under retailer names. And that is interesting to think about. Why is that? And looking at Tesco, it's quite interesting and interesting to look at how they've changed and tried to change the position of their products and their brands. If we go back to the 70s and the 80s, this is what it looked like when it comes to cornflakes in Tesco stores. You had, of course, Kellogg's, the manufacturer brand, the leading manufacturer brand. You had Tesco's own cornflakes, and you had the value, the very cheap, generic type of brand on the shelves. And if we look at from a customer point of view and the retailer point of view, you see some discrepancies here. From a customer point of view, the retail brand, which is the middle one, the Tesco one, Tesco thinks that is in the mind of the consumer, that is placed in the mid-range. But from a customer point of view, no, it's the same as the generic one. It's definitely not Kellogg's. And when Tesco and other retailers realized that, they tried to do something about it. So we're looking back to the 90s when Tesco launched a new wave of private labels. You see that the packaging is quite similar to Kellogg's, but that is really not the important thing here. It's not unimportant, but what they did was that they relaunched their private labels so that the customer would perceive a difference between Tesco cornflakes and Tesco value cornflakes. So you could see that they moved closer to the leading manufacturer brands with their products and differentiating themselves against the generic, the fighting brand, which is also Tesco. But Tesco wanted to show the customers that we are also making products that are as good as the manufacturer brand. If you buy Tesco, you're not compromising on anything. We're just giving you a better price, but it's the same quality of products as the manufacturer brands. And that in turn paved the way for segmenting even more, like I showed you before, 7 different private labels in the grocery area. The Tesco brand has been established as something that is as good for products as manufacturer brand, leading manufacturer brands. As a retailer, you of course don't want to be second hand for your customers, because if you're second hand, why would they want to buy anything other than very cheap products from you? And you don't want to turn out to be second hand. Moving on, we can see quite a number of different private brand portfolio strategies when it comes to retailers. I mean, really it is the choice between focusing on a mother brand, Tesco for everything, or mother-daughter brand, Tesco and some sub-brands like Tesco do, or the daughter and the mother brand as the second one, or not following up the mother brand at all, just using individual product names like Lidl and Aldi does. Looking around, looking outside the grocery industry, we find some very different ways of doing this. H&M works with a portfolio that works around Cheap Monday, other stories, Weekday, Monkey and COS. So H&M has selected to work around individual brand names, so to speak. It's not H&M and the brand name is COS. It's COS, and you don't see H&M anywhere there. IKEA, like you know, everything is IKEA, but IKEA is part of a conglomerate. So you would think it would be tempting for IKEA to put a brand name on other things as well, but really no. In the other parts of the IKEA world, which is a bank, and they work with housing as well, apartments and housing, but they've chosen to not use the IKEA name there, so it's individual brand names there as well. Even though in BoKlok, which is Living Smart, you find the colors that is used by IKEA as well, but on the other hand, blue and yellow are the Swedish colors. So ICA has a strategy that is quite similar to Tesco's. Corporate brands, they work with financial services, etc. But it's the ICA brand is everywhere, really. And looking at the fourth assignment, private label strategies for retailers is one very important part of retail branding. And what type of strategies for retail branding can you see? Give examples of different strategies. Last but not least, I want to share with you a very unique way of working with branding in retailing. And Tesco at the moment is having some difficulties and are facing difficulties when it has to do with honesty in accounting, etc. at the moment. But that doesn't take away the fact that if we look at least European retailing the last 10 to 15 years, this is the dominant figure. This is really those who have driven the market in many aspects. Nobody tries harder for customers. They treat everyone how they like to be treated. We use our scale for good. That's how they look upon themselves internally. But the thing I wanted to show you here is the fact that the Tesco brand seems to be able to stretch into areas that no other retailer has ever been able to stretch their brand. They defy all laws on brand extension, actually. I showed you before the fact that they have 7 brands in the grocery area. But they also sell wedding rings. They sell health and well-being. They sell a number of different lines of clothing in their stores. pharmacy, personal finance, if you want to buy glasses from them, phones, they have a mobile business as well. Of course you can buy a tablet from Tesco with the Tesco name on it, cheap ones as well. Broadband, you can lend money from Tesco. Petrol, e-books, fire services, inkjet refill kit. They have beauty parlors, vacuum cleaners. I mean, it's such a diversity, and it defies all laws of brand and brand extension. But it also says something about the strength of the Tesco brand. The fact that they are able to put it on so many diverse things and get away with it, at least so far. So for the fifth and the last assignment, I want a couple of the groups to look at and see if you can find any similar cases to Tesco when it comes to extending the brand in the retail sector, or if you can find somebody who's been able to stretch their brand outside the retail sector. And why do you think it's been possible for Tesco to extend their brand in this way? Okay, thank you very much. See you on the 11th.